this is setting up your style guide in ClickFunnels 2.0. The value of setting up your style guide is immensely big. If you take the time, and it might take you at least an hour to set it up really properly, and make sure everything is exactly the way you want it to be, but it is way worth your time to do that because it's going to make all your funnel builds super fast. So how you find your style guide is you click on workspace settings, then a new menu will open up. Just scroll down and navigate to styles in the left hand navigation bar. So I have already created this style, as you can see, not too long ago. And you can either edit a style by editing over here, changing the name, and then customizing the style, or you can create a new style. You just create a new style, give it a name, and create style. I'm not going to do that again. And then you are going to click on the little art icon and customize your design. So I already have that open over here, and I have just pulled in this brand board that I have over here, and it doesn't matter how your brand colors or fonts are set up. It might just be on a Google page or in a spreadsheet or something like that. What you are essentially going to do is you are going to use your fonts and your colors, and you are just going to set up a style guide so that it's very easy for you to start building pages and funnels inside of ClickFunnels. So if I can just run through these settings with you and just talk you through it very fast, then you can take the time to actually set this up yourself. What I have noticed in 2.0 is that the automatically scale mobile sizes aren't doing what I want it to do. So I rarely use this. I have found that I need to override a lot on mobile if I do use this. So I just tend to ignore that and rather set up mobile and desktop manually. You can use automatically scale if you wanted to. Just remember that you would need to set the base size. This will change. So let's say if that is 20, as you can see, the base size is changing. It's making it way bigger. If I make it 18, it's going to be a little bit smaller. So this is the base size for mobile, and then for desktop, and then the base size for mobile. This is where I think the issue comes in with what I don't like about the automatically scale, because if your base size isn't set correctly, then this is all out of whack. So I don't like to use it as much. I prefer doing it manually, but you can play around with this and decide for yourself. So that is inside of font. So you are just going to look at wherever it is that your branding is and you are going to update every font accordingly. There is no set rule that I can give you about sizing. That is something that you are going to have to decide for yourself. Fonts differ, the heights differ, the widths differ, and sizing does differ according to whatever font you have. So I do like to start with something around 70 or 60. This has actually changed now because of the base size changes that I have made, so I'll have to go in. I like to start with 60 for my largest headline font and then scale down from there. A good piece of advice that I can give you is set the biggest one and the smallest one first. So let's say I want the smallest one to be 30 or maybe 28. And then you can start to scale in between the in-between sizes. So whatever that is that looks good to you, you can do that. I tend to go in increments of 10. I found that just sometimes works really well. So as you can see now, I have 60, 50, 40, and 30. And if you're happy with that, you can totally move on to the next section. So you choose your font by going to the font family. If you have uploaded a custom font, that will be here. If you're using a Google font, then you will just type in the name. And if you don't see it pop up, you might have as many uploaded fonts as I do. Just scroll a little ways down and you will find it over here. And you can set the weight of your font by just toggling and playing around with what it is that you want over here. As you can see, again, like gives total different feels, bold and not bold, for this specific font. Letter spacing is straightforward. You can play around with if you wanted to make your font a little wider, maybe you wanted it to be a little skinnier, like something like that perhaps. The line height is a little tricky, and you might find that once you get into a bold and you have real copy on your page, that the line height does feel a little bit off. It defaults to 120. I have found that 110 is a better line height for me, but again, that depends on your style and how you like things to be set up. Then we can move over to mobile sizes. Letter spacing is working exactly the same. Line height is exactly the same, so you can play around with that. So again, I like 110. I think it's close enough to work together, but it's not far enough that it feels weird or is squished. So maybe 115 for mobile. And then on the mobile sizes, the only trick I can give you is once again start with the smallest and the biggest and scale the in between. Maybe for this, start with the smallest. So 18 for a headline on mobile, I think is a little bit too small. So I'm going to do 22, and then I'm maybe going to just scale these up this way and see how it feels. Yeah, I think that is good. So it's just one of those things where you have to play around and see how it looks to you and how it feels. And you might see, if this is the first time that you're doing this, that you want to start, when you start building your funnel, you want to come back to your style guide and make a few tweaks. That is totally fine. Tweak away until you have it exactly the way you want it, because it's going to make your life so much easier. So the same thing will apply for sub headlines and content fonts. I'm not going to go into those, but the settings look exactly the same for both of these. So use your discretion, play around with the sizes. The only thing that I can say is for body text, don't go below 12 for mobile sizes. So as you can see, that is really kind of small. I think it is okay for mobile. Again, it depends on your audience. So if you are targeting people that might find difficulty reading this, then you can definitely make this a little bit bigger. And then for desktop, that is totally up to you. Again, I think you can go as small as 16 maybe for desktop, and scale it up from there. But that is completely up to you. So what does happen is, if you set the base font size over here, then ClickFunnels does default to some settings that they think fits the bill about the size that you have chosen. And a lot of times it actually works out really well. So you can play around with this and try and find spacing, or not spacing, sizing that works for your brand. So that is font setup. Next up is the colors. I have just grabbed all of these colors. I have pulled them into my style guide by clicking on every color block and adding the hex code into it. I only have 6 colors on my brand board over here, and I have added white and black as my 7th and 8th color. If you maybe already have black and white in your palette, you are welcome to just fill up the empty blocks with white or black. That depends. I just tend to use white, so that you do not have the default colors when you start a new style guide in that style. Okay, so this is basically where all the magic is going to happen. Under this little paint colors section, we are going to set up all these backgrounds colors with font colors that we would like to see when we choose a certain background color. This is the section that's going to make your life so much easier and so much more fun to build funnels. So we are going to spend a little time here, not now in this video, but you will actually spend some time here in this video. So I'm just going to choose this colored background and walk you guys through that. I think it is pretty clear. Lightest would be white. Light would be your lightest color. If you're not using white at all in your design, or you might have a different white, then that would obviously apply to this lightest color. Colored background is the color that you would actually use as a background. So for instance, I wouldn't necessarily use this rust brown color as a full background color. I don't know if that would really look really nice. I possibly might do that, but I'm unsure about it. So I'm just using the blue as the background color for this section. And then you have your darkest color, dark color, and your darkest color. This is all going to depend on your brand and how you are using it and what colors you have. So I cannot give you guys clear instructions on that. But what I can talk you guys through is, for all my light colors, I really tend to use the color that I would most often use for text, be it black, or this is like an off black, if I can call it that. It's like a charcoaly black color. For all my light colors, and then for my darker colors, I just like to use white. In this case, and I will scroll there for you now. Yeah, so I like to use white. Here I have white, and here I think I have that oatmeal-y color on the darkest setting. Okay, so as you saw, I just change all of these to be the exact same color. It works way easier for me than trying to now maybe have a subheadline in like this color, because maybe when I'm building, I don't really want this color, because it's more often that you would have the same color, then you would have different colors. So in my mind, it's way easier that while I'm actually building out my funnel and I see everything in action, then to go in and decide what I want these colors to maybe be. But my base color and my default color would always just be white. And then the bullet color you can change to be whatever you want. I did change it here to be like on the darker colors, the brown color, and on the lightest color, the light blue color. So again, it depends on your brand. So you can go back and update that, and then go back to style guide. Next up is shadows. Shadows again is a really personal thing. These days when I'm building for clients, I tend to leave this as the default setting. I have found that it really works well. The colors are good and it's all great. I might go in and play around with the transparency a little bit, but this is really personal. So yeah. You have two settings. You have inset settings and outset. I have rarely used inset settings for this type of shadow. But again, if that is something that you like, then go ahead and play around with that. The X direction is the left and right direction. So if I make it more, it's taking my shadow all the way to the right hand side. And if I make it all the way negative, it's coming to the left hand side. So again, just personal preference. I just use 0 for X and Y. I like a full shadow around my boxes. But again, if you wanted to maybe have your shadow be a little bit more of a drop shadow, you might change your Y direction to be a little bit more downward facing, then having it all around your section. The blur amount is how blurry your shadow would be. So if I take it all the way to 0, you can see the shadow seems to be a border right now. And the further up I take the blur amount, the more blurrier it gets, and it gets almost like a little bit softer. So I really like that. I like shadows that are really soft. I feel they are a bit more modern than harder shadows. Spread is pretty self-explanatory. It is how far the shadow is actually going to be spread out from the section. So I tend to have a few different settings like they have as the default for us here. One that is not as far spread, a little bit farther spread, and a little bit more further spread. You can change your shadow color to be anything you want it to be, and you can play around with the, oops, let me just go back to shadow 1, that's where we are. The transparency of the color, I can move up and down and play around and get the actual shadow effect that I really like. Okay, so that is shadows. Next up is borders. So the border settings, as I said, is pretty self-explanatory. You have three different border styles that you can set up for yourself, 1, 2, and 3. Just make sure to toggle between them to actually set them up. You do have different settings. Sorry, my cat is in the way here today. So I just want to make this a little fatter so that you can see that you can have dashed and dotted, and you can obviously play around with the color and do whatever you want. If you click on theme, it'll show you your default style guide colors that you have just set up previously, and you can play around with that and decide like what type of border you would like. So maybe this one, maybe your borders are all the same, you just maybe want this one to be a little thicker, or you want one to be a bit more transparent, or whatever that might be. So I'm just going to do that and have 1, 2, and 3 be set up that way. Next we have buttons, and buttons is where you will be spending quite a little bit of time. You have 3 button styles that you are able to set up. So once you have set them up, it's very easy when you're building a funnel to actually toggle between the different button styles that you have set up, and it'll just make your life so much easier. So I would spend some time here. ClickFunnels has given us the ability to set up gradient buttons, as you can see that I have set up here. The way you do that is you click on background color, you come to custom, and then here it'll say solid. You can just toggle that to gradient. Well, that's the wrong way around. Solid and gradient. So let's say I want gradient. I don't know why it's doing that. It's a little wonky. And then you can add in the colors. Unfortunately, you would have to come back to your brand board and grab your colors again. For the gradient, you have no way to actually, from the gradient settings, to choose the styles that you have already set up. So let's just say that I am doing that as my button settings. Then you set your colors. You can set the hover color. That is, if I hover over this first button, you can see it is changing. That is actually this second button that you see over here. So if I hover over it, it is changing. If you don't want the hover effect, you are just going to choose the actual style that you are using. In this case, with the gradient, it'll show up in your recently used buttons. So that is pretty cool. And then if I hover over it now, you see nothing is happening. They are all exactly the same. So if I do that on a solid color, let's say I want this, then you will see that that is happening. So if I do my default button, maybe all of them are these brown colors, then you'll see no hover effect happening, or I can actually change it to whatever I want it to be, and if you hover over it, then it'll turn the color that I want it to be. And then I can also change the hover text color so that this happens. Again, it just depends on your style and how you want to set that up. I'm not going to set up these buttons. You will choose your button font. Mine in this case is Oswald. You can set the weight of your button. Remember, with the weight, it does default to something else. So you will just have to come in and change that, because I think it defaults to like bold. Even though it will say regular, it's not going to display regular over here. So just toggle on and off between the different weights until you find the one that you really want. Font size for button, again, this depends. I tend to gravitate to more smaller fonts on buttons. That is just my style, and I like it a little bit more than actually having big in your face buttons. But again, it depends on you and your style. When you open your style for your buttons, this linked icon will be active. So what that means is if I change this font size on desktop, it is also changing the mobile font size. So you will just need to make sure that you either scratch it through so that they aren't linked anymore, and then you can change your button size on mobile manually, or if you want them to be exactly the same size, then you can totally do that. Letter spacing is straightforward, line height is straightforward. Text casing, this is where you will set, if you want your buttons maybe to be all caps, you can set that here. Or if you want them to be capitalized, you can set that here. If you don't want them to be anything and you want to manually be able to type in however you want it to be, then you will choose this little dot icon. Okay. Your subtext, the top margin is a new setting in ClickFunnels, and this is great because it is actually allowed us to now play around with the spacing that we want between the button text and the subtext. So I like 3px. You might want it to be a little bit more. That's completely up to you, so you can play around with that. Then the rest of the subtext settings are exactly the same. You have your size settings. It will be linked to the mobile settings, so make sure you turn that off if you don't want them to be the same. Letter spacing, line height, text casing, all of that. I would not recommend adding shadows to button text or subtext. I find it really hard to read, but if you really wanted to, you would just toggle this on or off, and you can change that. If you like a border around your button, this would be the place where you would do that, and you can actually just play around and have different border styles depending on your style and how you would like that. What is a little bit frustrating is you cannot change the hover style or the press style. So I just tend to, or maybe if I actually change this, no, nope, cannot change the hover or the press style on borders, so I just tend not to use that at all. For corners, the only thing that I really want to say about this is if you want a pull shaped button like I have here, our tendency would be to go all the way to 400. So this would be square 0 to go all the way to 400. What does happen on mobile, and you will not see that on the style guide here, everything seems to be working fine. Once you have text inside of your button and it gets a little long, your mobile view of the button would start to become a little circle, because we are telling the builder to actually make the corners as rounded as possible. If you have a fatter button because your text is over multiple lines, then that button starts to look like an actual circle. So I have found that around between 50 and 80, I would say, is a good setting for a pull shape button. But just make sure when you build your first funnel that you check the mobile buttons and make sure that that corner setting is set so that your buttons don't look weird on mobile. You're able to separate the edges. So let's say I wanted this little bottom corner to be pointy like that, then I could totally do that and play around with these different little settings. So that's pretty straightforward. And then shadows, again, the same as the shadow settings. We have an X, a Y, a blur amount, a spread amount, and the color that we can change. I'm not going to walk through these. You will just play around and find the shadow that you really like. I like soft shadows once again, so that is how I have that set up. Click update and you can go back to your style guide. Corners, I'm not going to walk through. This is really straightforward. You would just set up 3 different styles for how rounded or not rounded you want your corners to be. And you can save that and then go back to website and you will be taken back to this screen. So what I wanted to show you guys is if we actually, I have so many style guides open, start building a funnel, then this is where the magic happens. So when you go to add a new funnel, it doesn't ask you anymore what style guide you want to apply to the funnel. So I've created a new funnel, I put in my funnel name, and I said create funnel. There's no place to choose the style guide. Where you're going to choose your style guide now is you're going to go to settings and then just scroll down, and as you can see, this style is set to the main bright bold creative style guide. You will actually just drop down and type in the style guide that you want and update your funnel. And I've already added a page. Yours would be blank. When you go to add a page, and I'll do that for you guys now. So if I go to add a page, and I'm just going to say new page, you can actually set the style here, but I do not recommend you to set the style here. What happens then is that style is attached to that page. And if you maybe want to duplicate your funnel, or you ever want to update your style to something new, then that specific page will be attached to a specific style guide. So try and leave this as the default style when you create a new page. Oops, let's just say step 2. That way, if you change the funnel settings, then all of the pages will update. So that's just a little tip. So we have updated the style guide to be this branding, and as you can see, it doesn't seem like anything has happened, but when I go to edit the page, you will actually see that it has changed to be the new cityscape branding. Hopefully, yes. Okay. So the thumbnails do take a little while to update. And as you can see, I have built out a couple of sections. I haven't changed anything. I've just used all the native setup settings that we have set up in our style guide, and it just makes it so much easier. I can now go in and maybe say, oh, I want my headline to be smaller or bigger, or my subheadline, maybe I want that to be smaller, and I can start playing around. So with buttons, you will choose style 1, 2, or 3. So we haven't set the other 2 up, but this is basically where you would choose that. And it just makes your life so much easier. As you can see, I have a dark background here, and this text has defaulted to be the actual color that we have set up over here. And on the lightest one, I have the darker text like we set up. The same would apply inside of rows. So right now I have a white row with dark text. If I were to come to this little paint section and I maybe wanted to change the text to be, or the background to be this gray, you would see the text automatically changes to white. So setting up your style guide definitely saves you a lot of time to actually go into every single text element, every single button, and change all your settings, because right now everything is kind of set up the way I really want it to be. And let me maybe show you guys just if you have a button with maybe like you have a lot of text on it, like something like that, what happens on mobile. So right now it is actually set to be correct. So if I go to my style guide and I go to buttons and I just want to change this to be 400 and update this style. Oh, that didn't happen now. Let's maybe say we have some extra text in here. Oh, maybe they fixed the little bug. Okay. Any case, maybe if this was a little bit bigger, let me just override. So I just want to show you guys if that glitch is still here. So for mobile sizes, I want to, there we go. Okay. So that is exactly what's going to happen if you have your button set to the 400px, which is really horrible. And it really only happens when you have a lot of text happening. But I have found that if I change this down to like 80, my button might not be as pull shaped as I would like, but it definitely does make a difference. It will take way more to start to feel a little bit weird. So just remember that and keep that in account. And if you see that happening, you can just quickly navigate to your style guide over here, and you can update that and have it live on your page as you are building. So what makes this really great is if I now want to change this maybe to the lighter color, then that would actually change all my text and everything would change with it. So that is the value of setting up your style guide correctly. You can really quickly and efficiently start building out sections and adding things in without having to go in and do too much styling. So maybe I want this to be like a big paragraph with big text or something like that. I can do that really, really quickly. I hope this was helpful and enjoy setting up your style guide. It does take a little bit of time, but it's way worth it.